We're already down 6 games in week 17 of the 2024 fantasy football season, and for the most part, championship week has started as a total mess. So, before you guys set your final lineups heading into championship weekend, here are 6 things that you need to know before week 17 of the 2024 fantasy football season. All right, let's kick the video off with the fact that Tony Pollard has officially been ruled out in the Titans matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we have spent a lot of time this week talking about Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans as a true viable play going into week 17. Even when Pollard was potentially going to play in this game, right? Tyjae Spears coming off of 220-plus fantasy point performances, 2 games in a row with 2 touchdowns, and now he has this entire Titans backfield to himself going up against one of the worst defenses in the whole NFL and a defense allowing the 31st most fantasy points to opposing running backs on the season. This is a smash spot for Tyjae Spears. I mean, like I said, he made the must start video, and that was when I thought Pollard was going to be healthy for this matchup. So now that we have no Pollard in this backfield, Tyjae Spears becomes a option no matter what, like an option that you can potentially flex this week, an option as a true RB2 in your final roster for championship weekend. I think Tyjae Spears is going to have another big game, and at worst, he has a very solid floor going into this matchup. Now, you look at this offense, of course, like we still got Mason Rudolph at quarterback, and, you know, it's not super exciting. You got some other playmakers like Calvin Ridley, Chicken Conquo, who isn't in this video. But by the way, if you have Chicken Conquo, he is a great option at tight end in this matchup as well. I digress. Nick Westbrook-Akine has had his moments throughout the season as well with all those touchdowns. So there are enough playmakers here. I'm not going to just scratch this Titans offense off completely when Tyjae Spears has had 20-plus points in 2 straight weeks, and this is a great matchup all around against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know this is a meaningless game, for both the Titans and the Jaguars, but you got to expect these divisional opponents to come out, put together a good game script against these 2 soft defenses, and ultimately, if you have Tyjae Spears, who is now sitting at 61% rostered at the time I'm recording this, like I said, he's not just like a streaming option. If your RB2 is down or questionable, he's not just one of these players that you're picking up and crossing your fingers. He is a solid start going into the week, and overall his ceiling has now been elevated because Tony Pollard is out in week 17. Doubling down on that confidence in Tyjae Spears to have a great game this week by heading straight to Underdog to take the over on Spears to score a rushing touchdown in week 17. Don't forget, guys, as always, all new users on Underdog who sign up using promo code THECATCH are getting a free NFL Pick'em heading into week 17. You can take that free Pick'em, pair it with Tyjae Spears to score a touchdown in week 17. Once both of those lines hit, you'll automatically triple your cash entry. And on top of that, when you guys sign up on Underdog using promo code THECATCH, that link is down below, Underdog is also going to give you a 50% deposit match up to $1,000. And let's move along to another player who's doubtful and potentially out this week, and that is Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. And this is going to have a bit of a ripple effect if we truly don't see Tua out on the field in week 17. And for me, a doubtful report basically means that the player's out, but you never know. Sometimes they still play. And this one is a little bit scary because Tyreek Hill, a player who I was going into the week 17 as a huge fan of with this matchup against the Browns, giving up the 31st most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, I am now a little bit worried about, right? I just don't know exactly what to expect if we get Tyler Huntley at quarterback, who is reportedly going to be the next man up, not Skylar Thompson. I mean, I think that Hill probably has a solid floor in this matchup, just due to the matchup itself, but Tyreek Hill goes from like a must-start player who I had a lot of confidence in this week to, like I said, just kind of a floor play if Tua is truly not going to play. I'm worried about Jonnu Smith, and I'm even to a degree also worried about Devon Achane because I just don't know what this offense is going to look like here in week 17. We look at weeks 4 through 7. That's when Tyler Huntley got the majority of the snaps. Okay, Tyreek Hill, 8.2 points, 12.9 points, 2.3 points. Johnny Smith in that stretch was not that bad, except for week 4 where he had 0 points, but week 5, 11.1, week 7, 22.6. So that is a bit encouraging. And Devon Achane, not so great in that stretch as well. 5.9 points, 2.7 points, 10.5 points. So I have literally no idea what to expect out of the Dolphin starters. But like I said, there are a lot of big names here in terms of fantasy lineups going into week 17. So I would say for the most part, you're probably still starting these guys: Hill, Johnny Smith, Devon Achane, very tough players to bench. And of course, Jalen Waddle is not going to play in week 17, or more than likely, as he's also listed as questionable. And I guess that's another aspect I want to touch on very quickly that I'm a bit worried about. Hill's questionable. Waddle's probably not going to play, listed as questionable. Pay attention, because if you own Tyreek Hill, you might just end up not playing in this matchup. Although the thing that kind of confuses me here, although I guess this injury to Tua is serious, is the fact that, well, the Dolphins are still technically in the playoff race. They're kind of down on the list in terms of wild card teams, right? But they're still in the playoff race. So I'm just a little confused about what we're going to get out of the Dolphins this week. But Hill, Smith, Achane, I still think that they bring a solid floor due to the matchup against the Browns here. But this is a road game, and ultimately with a backup quarterback at play, I think we're looking at floor plays for some of these studs on the Dolphins teams. And I just don't know that they're going to have incredibly high ceilings going into week 17. Speaking of another stud wide receiver missing his quarterback, we all know that Jalen Hurts is now listed as out, as he's still in concussion protocol going into week 17, and that Kenny Pickett is going to get the start for the Eagles. What do we do with A.J. Brown, who I got a lot of questions about over the past week, or going into the week, I should say, who's had 2 really strong performances in a row against Pittsburgh and Washington in weeks 15 and 16 with 23.7 or more fantasy points in his last 2 games, and has a pretty dang good matchup against the Cowboys this week, giving up the 25th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. I would say, even with Pickett at quarterback, and even though he's a little bit banged up technically, I would still roll with A.J. Brown. I think his floor is safe. This is still an important game for the Eagles. Remember, this game still has playoff implications for them, and they want to rack up as many divisional wins as possible. They also play the Giants in week 18, so these last 2 games are still important for the Eagles, especially in the playoff race looking against the Commanders, right? So just remember, A.J. Brown is still averaging 17 fantasy points per game. He's moved up to the wide receiver 8 so far on the season. And I know Kenny Pickett is no Jalen Hurts here, but we still have a lot of games over the past, basically the whole season, where, I was going to say over the past few weeks, but basically over the whole season, where Jalen Hurts hasn't thrown for a ton of passing yards. And although A.J. Brown has been a bit up and down at times, he has still come through for the most part, only giving you single digits twice on the season, and only giving you 13 or less fantasy points 5 times on the season. So he still has had a pretty solid floor at 17 fantasy points per game and a good ceiling overall. So if you own A.J. Brown, I'm not going to panic here. If you own Devonta Smith, probably not going to panic on Devonta Smith as well. I think he'll still be okay. And ultimately, I think that this Eagles team will find a way to put together a good overall offensive day. And if you own any of these Eagles wide receivers, I think you're going to be completely fine. And of course, if you own Saquon Barkley against this Cowboys defense, you're also going to be completely fine here in week 17. All right, next thing that you need to know is that both Cade Otton and Sterling Shepard are out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going into week 17. And I think that's going to open things up for Jalen McMillan, rookie wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who's been on absolute fire over the past 3 weeks with at least 1 touchdown in each of his last 3 games, 4 touchdowns in that stretch, 16.7 or more fantasy points in that stretch as well. So if you're in need of a flex play going into the week, although this is the toughest matchup that McMillan has had in this overall stretch, right, as the Panthers are not one of these teams we can just sneeze at. They got a really bad run defense, but overall they're pretty strong against the pass, giving up the 9th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. But I'm not going to panic here because this is a must-win game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The last time we saw the Bucs and the Panthers play, we saw a good amount of points scored in a pretty competitive game script. I think we're going to see that again, but the Bucs have a little bit of an advantage here as they are playing at home. And like I said, I mean, we got no Kate Otten. We got no Sterling Shepard. I mean, Trey Palmer's the next man up behind McMillan. Of course, Mike Evans can be the wide receiver one. I think you could argue that some sort of passing volume, of course, will go to Bucky Irving and Rashad White. But overall, Jalen McMillan is the wide receiver two, the number 2 pass catcher on this team going into Week 17, in my opinion. Like I said, the Bucs have to win this game. They are out of the playoffs right now. They have to catch Atlanta here. They need Atlanta to lose. They need to win this game, and they need basically the same exact thing to happen in Week 18 as Atlanta has the tiebreaker in the division because I beat the Bucs twice this season. So big game for the Bucs. They're going to come out here, give it everything that they have their foot on the gas the whole time, do whatever they can to win this game. And I guarantee you that the Panthers are going to come out and do whatever they can to ensure that a divisional opponent in the Buccaneers loses this game. So good game script here. Not going to be worried about the matchup. Couple of injuries here to other pass catchers on this team. So if you own McMillan, sitting at 58% rostered, he's a great flex option, somebody that you might be able to pick up off of the waiver if you need a last-minute spot play. And overall, he's a strong flex candidate going into Week 17. Next thing that you need to know is that Isaac Guerendo, playing on Monday Night Football against the Lions, is active and going to play off of the injury report. Was dealing with a foot and hamstring injury, but he has been cleared to play. Don't need to worry about potentially starting Patrick Taylor. But if you do own Isaac Guerendo, I don't quite know how I feel about him going into this matchup against the Lions. A tough matchup as the Lions have given up the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs on the season so far. Meaningless game here for the Niners. Not so much of a meaningless game for the Lions, however. Nonetheless, Guerendo has been solid in his, last 2 starts. Week 14, 26.8 fantasy points. Week 15, 11.5 fantasy points. Missed Week 16. And on top of that, while the Lions have been very good against the run on the season as a whole, they are very banged up on that defense right now. And they are not just banged up in the secondary, they are banged up front as well. So if you own Guerendo, you just got to look at what you got here. I don't think he's a must-start player. I mean, a lot of people look at these Niners running backs and say, whoever's starting for the Niners, I want in my lineup. And, this is a home game for the Niners. Lions defense is banged up. I could see Guerendo coming through, having a solid game, scoring a touchdown, getting double digits, but I just don't know if he has a crazy high ceiling still at the end of the day in this matchup. And like I said, it's a meaningless game for the Niners. They're just here to kind of spoil the Lions, but the Lions are more than likely still going to have the number one seed overall in the NFC, So I just don't know about this one. I would still say look at what you have. Isaac Guerendo, not a player that I'm going to force into my starting lineup just because he's a running back for the Niners and all that stuff. He's still got plenty of volume to go around here. It's such a weird offense, right? They're just still not in an overall great spot. But, I mean, you got guys like Devo, Jennings, Kittle, all of that going on here. You just don't know what you're going to get out of this offense on a weekly basis, right? So if you own Guerendo, don't force him into your starting lineup. Look at what you got. Even though he's active going into Week 17, I'm not going to call him a must-start running back as we approach the week. Last but not least, I want you guys to know that Josh Allen is an absolute must-start quarterback, no matter what. He's off the injury report, has the elbow issue, has the shoulder issue. He's going to play. I know last week wasn't great, guys. I know he only had 12.1 fantasy points, but I got way too many questions about Josh Allen going into championship weekend. This is still your quarterback 2 on the season thus far. I mean, I think technically right now, the time I'm recording this, Burrow has surpassed him, but we'll see how it all shakes out. He's for sure a top 5 quarterback on the season, probably going to finish as a top 3 quarterback through Week 17 of the fantasy season. I know last week wasn't great. It is what it is. I know this week on paper is not a great matchup against the Jets. And you got a lot of people kind of concerned, like, is Josh Allen going to play the whole game? Are they going to pull him? What if they get up on the Jets in this matchup? Is he only going to play 2 quarters? I think Josh Allen's going to play this whole game. He's falling back in the MVP race, depending on who you ask, to Lamar Jackson. Vegas still has him as Josh Allen as a favorite, but I think Josh Allen really wants to do whatever he can to try and secure the MVP award. I don't know. I don't know how much it matters to him or to Sean McDermott. We'll find out. But ultimately, I think he's going to play this whole game. I would have much more concerns if for some reason you play in week 18, which they're like 10% of you guys out there do play in week 18. I'd have a lot more concern about Josh Allen in week 18 as opposed to week 17. I think he's going to play this entire game. He's off the injury report. I don't know how much I really need to elaborate on this, but all I'm saying is I got way too many questions about Josh Allen going into the week. If you own Josh Allen, he's an absolute must-start quarterback. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And ultimately, I know there's a couple factors here, okay? Last week, the matchup, the injuries, all the stuff about it. Is he going to potentially play the full game? I'm not worried about any of it. You got to ride or die with a player of this caliber. If I own Josh Allen, I am 110% starting him in championship weekend. That'll do it for today's video. There are 6 things that you need to know heading into championship weekend of the 2024 fantasy football season. As always, guys, I'll do my best to answer as many fantasy football questions in the comment section down below as I possibly can. So if you guys need anything last minute, be sure to drop me a comment. I'll answer as many comments as I can before kickoff today. On top of that, be sure that you guys are subscribed to the channel, so we're going to have everything that you guys need as we enter the 2025 fantasy football season. Hope you guys dominate next year. Guys, it's been a fantastic season here on the channel. We did everything we possibly could every single week, every single day of the entire football season, to help you guys dominate each and every week of the 2024 fantasy football season. So thank you guys so much for all of the support. Truly appreciate each and every one of you guys. And of course, good luck to you guys here in week 17 in championship weekend. I hope everybody brings home a championship here in the 2024 season. And as always, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.